I am the treasurer of the Budget and Finance Committee, and I'm going to call this meeting to order at 9 o'clock. If you would like to join me, if you can, please stand and we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have a full committee this morning, all present, and so we will establish that there is a quorum. The meeting procedure statement, the governing board and its committees conduct all their meetings in compliance with Arizona Planned Community Association open meeting laws per ARS 33-1804, and in concert with RCSCW bylaws, policies, and standing rules. Parliamentary procedure as outlined in the most recent edition of Robert's Rules of Order will also be followed in all meetings as appropriate, consistent with Bylaw 3.07 and Standing Rules number 2 and 3, adopted by the Governing Board January 23rd, 2005. All right, first topic up, we're going to talk about the approval of the minutes from September the 16th. Are there any questions or comments about the minutes from September 16th? Seeing no one on the committee raise their hand or indicate a change, are there any challenges or any questions from the online? No questions online, and we have nobody in the audience asking any questions. So we'll approve those minutes as written and as submitted. Thank you. The next topic, I'm going to flip things around. I'm going to ask for the CLA annual audit presentation to come first, and then we'll let Cliff go second. All right? So if you're prepared, we're ready for you to jump in. Erin Sparks.
Sounds good. Thank you, everybody, for having me. My name is Erin Sparks. I am a principal at CLA and ultimately responsible for signing the audit report and the high-level technical reviews. I also want to introduce Kevin Pataki. He is the senior in charge and was deep in the weeds, which I'll go through kind of what the audit process is that we do to get to our conclusion today. So let me start. Our agenda is to talk about the audit opinion, the required communications, go through the financial highlights, and then talk about what the steps are to finalize the engagement and issue. Okay, so audit opinions and financial results. So a financial statement, we have found that this is an unmodified opinion. So that means there's no gap departures, there's no challenges with management bias over any estimates. And I want to take a step back and kind of go through how we get to this process because it is lengthy. We started our audit, I think, in early August. Before that happens, we do a lot of planning meetings with the accounting team, with people in finance, management, some board members that we had reached out to. And ultimately what we're doing here is planning our risk-based approach to an audit. So in an audit, we're not looking at every transaction. We are taking samples of high-risk areas based on conversations with management and just knowing your organization, as we've been a part of it for many, many years. This is my second year involved. Kevin, I believe this is your fourth. So we have a little bit of fresh eyes, and our engagement team also is comprised of people that really know your engagement because they've been involved. And we talk to Cliff and Terry throughout the year. So our planning isn't just a one-stop item. We have about 4 times of touch bases during the year to make sure that we know what's going on with your organization. If there's any new accounting pronouncements, we are working through those together to make sure that the audit doesn't have any adjustments or proposed adjustments. Because from time to time in our industry, our FASB and GAAP standards change and evolve. So once we have our audit planning, we look really at the internal controls of the organization. So three things that we do here. We get a high level of how the internal controls work based on what's written. Then we also go through and we'll do walkthroughs of these internal controls. So we're going to sit down with the accounting staff and we go through some of the transactions to ensure that the thousands of transactions that the organization record to get your financial statements that you review on a monthly basis look accurate. And this is where we're looking for any opportunities to give positive feedback or what we, our value-added services. As we've been working with Cliff and Terry for a long time, if anything comes up to their attention first, they call us and say, hey, we noticed something, how do we handle this? So all the things are corrected by the time that we actually do these walkthrough procedures and we have the audit. And then there are certain levels where we're testing the controls that are put in place to make sure your revenue streams, which are highly relevant to your financial statements, are properly recorded. And again, we're looking at strengthening internal controls and making sure that there are, if there are any adjustments, there's a reason for them. So that's just the tip of the iceberg of what we do. Then we're looking at the balance sheet items and we're looking at the revenue. So I'm going to go in through the next slide and kind of describe some of the testing that we perform. So some of the financial statement highlights here, looking at the balance sheet, we're testing cash for existence. We're looking at the investments and we're relying on the statements, but we're also making sure that the income does look, we're matching it against our other industry clients' income to make sure, your investments is your income. Is it me waving this thing? I can step back. Are in line with everyone else's income, and that there isn't something that we're picking up that your third party administrator is doing good or bad. So that's really what we're looking at. Receivables, we're looking to see that these are collectible and valued correctly. And inventories and prepaid assets, we look for those on kind of an analytical basis. Property, land, buildings, and equipment, that is what really is driving your organization. That is driving your revenue. So we test additions, but this is what our driving force is when I get to our revenue, because in an HOA organization, not all of the assessments that are collected in a year are recognized in revenue unless your property, it's been put toward land, buildings, and equipment or other repairs and maintenance. So we thoroughly go through these invoices. We're looking for timing issues. We're looking for paid invoices. And that's probably one of our riskiest areas is this account. It just takes a lot of time to go through. You guys have had a lot of activity over the last couple of years, so it's been fun to see the evolution. So I'll kind of go through some of those highlights then. Cash has decreased, investments have increased. Some of the cash has been moved to the investments, but really the cash has been used in the land, building, and equipment, all the activity that you have been doing with the irrigation. And so accounts payable at the end of this year also increased. And again, that is from some of the accounts payable related to the improvements that are going on in the organization. The reserve replacement fund also has increased. And this is this is the one journal entry that we post every year. We go through a calculation with Cliff based on all the assessments that have been collected from cash, what has been spent on property and equipment or other repairs and maintenance. And then there is a portion of it that is allocated to this liability account called the replacement fund reserve. So these are the monies that belong to the organization that are for your future repairs, replacements, any of these big projects, and especially when you're looking at the cost, you know, this is the numbers you're looking at to say, are we going to raise our assessments or not? You know, here's what we have planned, here's what we need to maybe ask for from the community to sustain everything that you're offering to the association members. I can pause here. Any questions on these numbers? Okay, so the more exciting part is the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in the members' equity. Here again, there are a lot of revenue accounts that the organization has, and we do a deep dive into all of these on a assessment of internal control, and we are testing these. So we take samples of these to test, and then in other times we're doing control tests just to make sure that as you look at these numbers on a monthly basis, they are accurate. You're making great decisions based on live data that is accurate. And again, I want to highlight 2 slides back, we had no audit adjustments. We had no past journal entries. So what you're looking at, what you see every month, are good numbers. The only adjustment that we did have is the asset preservation fee recognized. So it actually decreased a little bit from the prior year, but that's because we have about a $1.5 million adjustment where we took it out of the revenue, we put it to that liability account because it wasn't spent or allocated, so that is there for the future. And then other highlights in here, golf fees increased and the net realized gain on investments also increased. Again, we look at these numbers to make sure that's in compliance with, you know, what the benchmarks are for across the nation and other HOA organizations. And we kind of see where you guys stand. So overall revenue in 2025 was 37.1 million. And some of the expense highlights as we are going through this inflation, wages and benefits always are increasing. This is the same, you know, with all of our HOA organizations. Repairs and maintenance, it increased from the prior year, and total expenses were about 34 million versus 33 million in the prior year. And I do want to highlight when we say we compare these, Kevin and I are part of a team. We have some others that you haven't seen. We do about 40 HOAs. So I do about 10 or 11 your size in Arizona, Colorado, North Carolina. So we are benchmarking your data, you know, just to see, and we give that feedback to Phil on, hey, how are you guys doing? Again, we also take all the best practices from everyone else to say, you know, how are we doing compared to these organizations? And you guys have a very healthy organization in my opinion, based on all the other clients that I serve. So some of the notes to the financials that I just want to highlight, the investments are measured at fair value, and we do look at these so you can see the different indexes that that management and you as the board have decided to invest your money to keep that moving. There are some related party transactions, such as the clubs, and we look at these as well. We take a sample of these items in our testing to make sure that the monies are allocated correctly to each club. Also, the note 5, land, building, and equipment. There is the construction in progress at the end of the year of $4 million. So as I say, you guys have a lot of projects, and some of them carry over from fiscal year to fiscal year. Other times those projects are wrapped up in the same year, and then they're allocated along, you know, the land improvements, building improvements, and equipment. And then note 8, this is where we have the $3.2 million of accumulated funds. Those are in investment accounts. Those are growing. And if you were to fully fund your reserve, this last report dated November 2023 would have been $64.6 million. So you have a very strong organization in your reserves compared to all the things that the HOA wants to do in the future. Can I ask any questions on these? Okay. So then, after my team does all of their hours of progress, and we came out here with a team of 5 for about 2 days. There's some of the testing that we do on site. A lot of it is electronic, but we do make sure that we talk to various people in the organization. I think we had about 5 fraud interviews. Some of you, we kind of try to rotate each year to make sure we're getting there's more to just the numbers, right? There's conversations that we have and with various people at the organization to make sure that they feel that they're not being asked to do anything that's uncomfortable or make mistakes. Everybody in the organization that we have talked to, they are very, very transparent and always want to do what's right. So we didn't have any of our conversations come up with anything that we didn't already know from management or we couldn't see in the numbers. So as it comes to my level, I'm looking at the overall items. We looked at our planning from our initial. We had no changes in our scope of our audit. There were no difficulties that we encountered during the audit, no disagreements with management on any gap issues, no findings to report. So sometimes no is a bad thing, but no on these slides, it's always good. So there, again, you can rely on the financial statements you're getting from your internal, because as we audit them from the external point of view, we don't have any changes to what you're seeing. So we look at these estimates that management makes for bias, and we were comfortable with all of their estimates. So again, to highlight, no audit adjustments. We consider the 1.5 million that we make every year as part of the audit, because we need to get through all of our testing in order to determine what amount of the assessment gets to go to the liability. And Cliff gives us those numbers. We just test them all before we make that journal entry. So again, that's why it's not an audit entry. They already, Cliff and Terry had given us the number, and we were in agreement with what that was. So the next steps then would be our management representation letter to be signed. And so another step that we do as well is, besides me reviewing everything, Kevin reviews his staff's item, I review everything at a higher detailed level, but we have a quality control team that doesn't they're not a part of the engagement. They are complete fresh eyes, and they also review our files and binders to make sure we're in compliance with GAAP, any adjustments that have come out, any changes in our FASBs that we needed to be aware of. And we plan with them, and again, it's just our third level of review to make sure these financial statements that you have wouldn't be restated or misstated. From time to time, we get new clients, and there are some changes that we have to make to their accounting. So it's been great to work with Phil and his team, Cliff, oh my gosh, sorry, and his team for a million years, I feel, because we have that relationship where if there's a question, they bring it to us in real time. They get that real-time answer. I'm always forgetting what I've done 3 weeks ago, let alone 3 months after you close the books, and then you're getting questions about any of your numbers. So we have that open communication where we're able to report on all the no's, because your books that you look at are in good shape every day. So the next steps to finalizations, any questions that you may have, any changes in the financial statements, we will run through. Cliff has already looked at everything, and we've made small updates. They've been through our quality control, so we're ready to issue, and then we will send out the management representation letter for signature, and then we should be issued within a week or so, depending on how quick it is to get the signatures back. So timeline recap, just wanted to say there's a lot that goes into this audit. We started some of the planning in July. Audit field work began in August and continued through September. And we were able to give the report to to Cliff, gosh, was September 11th, I feel. So the audit's been ready to go for some time. It's just waiting for this meeting that we know you guys want to approve. So with all of the preparedness for Cliff and his team, that's how we're able to get this audit done in like a really quick turnaround compared to some of our other clients. I did want to give a shout out to him for that because it's one of our favorites, I would say. And then CLA, we do a lot of other items. We have some webinars coming up and for helping with tax strategies. So keep us in mind. We do more than just the tax and audit, but we are a full service financial statement, financial security firm as well. And that kind of I got my 20 minutes, so I feel good.
Thank you very much,
Yes,
Erin.
yes.
Does anybody else have a comment or a question about the audit report as it was presented? Rick?
I have one question. What percentage of your audit is dedicated to checking the internal controls versus actually verifying the financial statements?
I would say as part of our planning is like 20%. So that the internal controls makes up about 50% of that, because that sets the whole tone. You know, if we know the internal controls have issues, we have a lot more testing that we have to do. So we are very thorough. We also do a lot of IT internal control work because that's just where life is going. Everything's kind of cloud-based. And so I would say a good 20% is based on the internal control, documenting, having the conversations, walking through those transactions to make sure the internal controls work.
And you found no deviation from any internal controls that we have?
Nothing in yet.
Okay.
Thanks, Rick. That's very good. Anybody else have any other questions or comments? Seeing none, do we have any online? There's none online, and there's no one in the audience with a question. So, Erin, I thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'm going to flip this over to Cliff and let Cliff start his presentation. If your head's not too big to stand up after that applause you just got.
Yeah, well.
1 second, please. Oh, you want me to recommend? Okay. I was going to wait till they left and make it be a surprise, but we'll go ahead and let them hear it. So 4.0 is the recommendation that the CLA annual audit be accepted as presented. Do I have any comments from the committee to the contrary? Seeing no contrary sides to that, we're going to go ahead and accept the audit as presented and bring that to closure. Thank you. All right, Cliff, sorry.
Good morning, committee. Thank you, Director Becknow. Happy to present the September year-to-date financials through the first quarter of 2025-2026. So I think you know the routine now. We're going to go through the financials. We're going to compare those to prior year budget and on the operating side. And then we're going to switch over to capital, and then we're going to talk about the reserve fund. So that said, let's take a look at September. 14,000 favorable to budget on the revenue side, pretty much right at budget at 1.9 million in revenue for the month of September. And then on the expense side, 128,000 favorable. We are early days here so the timing difference between, you know, when repairs and maintenance and landscape maintenance get done can show from year to year. So I would say once we get through overseeding, get to November and that landscape maintenance category, I think we got a pretty accurate picture of where we are exactly year over year because of those timing things that happen. But pretty good shape through in the month of September at 128,000 favorable, but we'll keep an eye on things. I will say utilities continues to come in favorable to budget, which is good. The weather's been a lot milder these first 3 months than it has been in the last couple of years. So we're saving. We have some efficiencies there. Fuel prices stay down. Natural gas prices stay down, and yeah, trash and phone are both down as well. Yeah, waste and telephone expense are both down as well. So overall for the month, 142,000 favorable to budget for the month of September at a $869,000 cash outflow. Again, keep in mind, we're going to continue to be at an outflow until those golf rates and rounds go back up. And we'll see that for 4 or 5 months as that happens. And then if we compare to prior year, 128,000 unfavorable, operating expenses, 194,000 unfavorable compared to September prior year. Most of that's due to wages and benefits increases, as well as timing on when seed was purchased in September versus it's going to be October this year. Looking at the revenue compared to budget for September year to date, we're 88,000 favorable, right on budget, really. I mean, we've got some additional golf revenue rounds. Golf rounds are up, are favorable to prior year through September for, let me see, I got that data right here. Golf rounds are up by approximately 1,900 rounds through September for the year. Most of that really is attributable to the weather. I mean, it's been nice, and people in July and August got out. In September, the rain's kind of dampened things a little bit, but no pun intended. But we'll continue to see golf and favorable. We are favorable to last year, even with the rain that we've had in the month of October, even just through the first part of the month here. So good news on the revenue side. Sports Pavilion, they were they're killing it in there. So we'll use all the favorable we can right now, because we will be closing in April to put those pin setters in. So looking at the expense structure, 238,000 favorable, 143,000 of wages and benefits. The bulk of that was that $70,000 credit we got back from 2024 in our health insurance. But health insurance does continue to be favorable to budget, and that's the bulk overall of that 143,000 in favorability in wages, benefits, and taxes. And then we'll just keep an eye on the expenses. Early days, the other expenses, we'll see how those continue to shake out for the year. Overall, 238, pretty good through September. So overall, with the favorable revenue and favorable expense, 326,000 at a approximately $1.8 million cash outflow through the first quarter of 2025-2026. Compare that to prior year, pretty much right on with prior year. 67,000 favorable, so we're tracking with prior year. So that just means that we're hitting our revenue benchmarks. We know our expenses are going to go up, but we're also hitting our revenue benchmarks that we set in our budget. Again, looking at that 199,000, 106 of that is wages and benefits, budgeted for, of course, and then landscape repairs, and that's just due to timing on seed purchases right now. All right, let's switch to the capital section of the income statement. And, you know, the key things to look at here are APFs, reserve, and the reserve fund performance. So the investment income right on budget in our reserve fund, we did have a $466,000 unrealized gain in our reserve fund. So it was good month for us. And APF fees were right on budget. So 517,000 favorable in the capital section. Compare that to prior year. Favorable to prior year in APF fees by 13,000. And looking at the reserve fund performance, we're favorable to prior year as well. Year to date, we're 995,000 favorable. APF fees are tracking a little behind. You'll see that we're about 8 APF fees off of budget. So that's showing up there in terms of transactions. But the reserve fund for the year is favorable. Well, is a net gain of 1.1 million for the first 3 months. Pretty good in the reserve fund. So we'll obviously we don't have control over that. 100% control over that. We're kind of subject to the market, but so far for the first quarter, we're looking pretty good. And if we compare that, compare the capital section to prior year, we're 202,000 unfavorable. We had better performance in our reserve fund valuation for the first quarter last year than we have this year. But other than that, everything looks pretty steady in here in this section. Talked about it earlier. We're 8 behind last year, and APF revenues for the year pretty much right on prior year. And then asset reserve fund valuation 241,000 less than last year. Year to date. But for the budget, we're 1.3 million favorable at a total overall revenues over under expense deficit of 365,000 for the first 3 months. Compared to prior year, right out with prior year, except in that capital section, we had a better reserve fund performance. So we're behind prior year at 136,000. All right, switching to capital expenditures and our capital budget this year. Capital improvement budget, we've got 5,148,000, and based on what's been PO'd and what we estimated during the budget process, we're estimating that we'll have a 331,000 favorable to budget in our capital improvement spend. So we're estimating right now the budget to come in at 4.8 million on a budget of 5.1 million. So we'll continue to track that throughout the year, but we're sitting pretty good right now.
Cliff, is this primarily items that are carried over from June of 2025 to be
No.
completed in 2026, or is this a combination of both?
This is just 25, 26, and then I have a slide on here because we had a question from Mr. Rufai on prior year carryover. So I'll talk about that here in a second. But these are just capital projects that were in this year's budget right now. Yep. So it's a good segue into the next slide, which is these are the prior year carryover projects that we had. You'll see in here Lizard Acres, the Echo Mesa irrigation project, Silvercraft. Lizard Acres just completed. Silvercraft also just completed. So those will be finalized next month. But we're running at a net positive of 53,741 on those projects right now. Versus what was carried over, what was budgeted, and then what was carried over, and what has been PO'd so far through the capital process.
So in the carryovers, and what you've got there is the encumbrance. So what we do when we carry it over is basically the money is put in, is available to be spent, right? So it's put in the operating fund and the money's available there. And that's what the 2.2 million is, right?
100% correct, yes.
Okay.
We carry those funds forward. We adjust the encumbrance every year. So it's not exactly that because we have carryover from a prior year that we have to adjust as well. But yes, policy allows us to, we can't carry over operating budget, right? So those funds go right in back into the reserve fund. But capital improvement budget, we are allowed to carry those funds forward into the next year and track those. And through the audit, we identify the exact amount of those funds and make sure they're available in the operating account.
Right. Yeah. So basically what that allows us to do is look at the budget and also take care of things because capital cannot always be completed in a single period.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yep. And timing, we're seasonal as well. So we can't start all of our projects in July. That irrigation project that we budgeted for last year started in April of last year. So, and we end our year in May. So we need to be able to carry those funds forward. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at the allowance budget, 420,000 in allowance. These are for unexpected capital expenditures, most of which are items that we have in our reserve study that just didn't meet their useful life. So we're going to take care of those in the current year. We thought they would meet their useful life, or it makes sense to to move them up for one reason or another. Other things that would be new would be things that come up through ADA, things like that that we don't that we're going to address in the current year. We use allowance funds for those items if they're not in the reserve study. So far, we've got 31,000 for the first 3 months, and these are the items that we've used the allowance funds for repair and replacement. And these are all capital improvement items, so they come out of the capital improvement budget. Okay, the fully funded balance, my favorite thing to talk about, because it all is about the fully funded balance. So if we projected this year to have 8.234 million in cash inflows. If we look at those inflows, we're tracking ahead in our on our operating cash flow. We talked about it earlier, 326,000. Our investment earnings net of fees is up for the year by $3,000. These are the investment income. So those are all positive impacts to the cash inflows. We're 57,000 unfavorable, unfortunately, from budget on our APF fees. But overall, on the cash inflows, we're doing pretty well at whatever, 6320, about 260,000. Okay. And then if we look at our budget outflows, we just talked about capital expenditures are budget outflows for us. And then we've got our reserve fund valuation. So we're at 331,000 in savings right now, which will be a positive impact. And then in our reserve fund valuation change, we're positive 860,000. So well on pace to meet our 50% fully funded balance at the end of the year. We'll continue to track this as we move throughout the year. Again, we are early days here. It's September. It's we're in October. So, but it's good news so far for the first quarter. That completes my financial presentation.
That's great. Thank you very much for that, Cliff. Were there any questions or comments about the financials that we just saw? Go ahead, Chris.
Hey, Cliff, you made a comment in the expenses about timing on seed purchases. I thought last year we made an advance purchase I was expecting to be to our advantage this year.
Yeah.
Can you explain that? I mean, did I understand that wrong?
Well, we always purchase, we try and purchase all of our seed at once because we can get that group pricing. Last year was chemicals that we made that advance purchase on. So I always say seed, but it's seed and chemicals. So timing on purchase of those can fluctuate throughout the year.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Cliff, I was looking at the year-to-date depreciation difference.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it's awful, $50,000 in the 3-month period for depreciation. What causes that? Because if you extend that out, that's going to be $300,000 by, the end of the year. And how can we be off that much on just depreciation? You should have a standard schedule, I would think.
Well, because of the carryovers that we do, the capital improvement items, until we complete those projects, we don't start depreciating them. So the timing on when we put the budget together, we estimate the completion of the projects on certain months. So it could fluctuate year over year. For us, depreciation is, yes, there's a variance to budget, but it's a non-cash item for us. We have no tax impact on it. There's no real impact other than having that variance in the financial statements. But when we put the budget together, we don't know when those projects are going to complete necessarily and when we're going to start depreciating those assets. So that creates a variance sometimes in what we budget versus what's actual depreciation expense.
Okay, if those projects come back in this year, we finish those up, are you going to go back and retroactively adjust for depreciation, or are you going to leave it the way it is?
No, the budget will stay what it is. We can't go back and we can't start depreciating an asset until it's complete. So we can't retro depreciate.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have one.
Oh, thanks. Go ahead.
On the APF fees, when you budget it, do you budget it by month based upon the historical sales by month, or do you do it flatline even over the 12 months?
Good question. When we budget APFs, we set the APF total in the budget, and then we distribute that based on prior year. And sometimes even just where the month end falls, if it falls right before the weekend or right after a weekend, can fluctuate when the APFs come in. But we do distribute them based on historical. We use prior year.
Any other questions? I don't see any from the committee. Do we have any questions online? No questions online. And the audience is staying in their seats, so we're going to let the financials go as they are. Thank you. The next topic is also yours, Cliff. We'd asked you to give us some more information regarding the loan history and the terms of the ARC.
Okay. Can you scroll down? Let's first talk about the loans. I have a schedule on here of the loans and the repayments down to the bottom. So these are the loan information. Can you present up in these the three dots and hit present? Thank you. All right. So on the loans, there have been 2 loans to ARC since 2016, and the first loan was for $898,000, and they made an initial payment on that loan of $437,000. Right when they signed, they completed the project. The project cost was approximately $899,000, and they had done some fundraising and raised $437,000 out of the gate. So really the beginning balance of that after that initial payment was $461,000. And then to the left, you could see the payments that have been made on that loan. The first loan was a 5-year loan, and there's no minimum payment required, just the term of the loan. The loan is that the loan be paid off within the period of time of the agreement. So the agreement was that the loan would be paid off in 5 years with a 5-year optional extension that was exercised in 2020 or 2021. So they exercised that 5-year option and then paid that loan off. And then we entered into another loan in 2019 for $399,000 for the second phase of that building and equipment. And it was the second phase was the paint booth. So they added the section onto the building, and then they purchased the paint booth. And that note was extended at a 10-year term, and it was $399,000, and then they've made those payments towards that, and they're on pace to complete that loan within the 10-year term that they agreed to, with an outstanding balance right now of $220,000, remaining balance of $220,000. And those loans were approved by the governing board and signed off. Those agreements were signed off by the governing board at the time that they were entered into. They are 0 interest loans, but the stipulation of the agreement is that when all of the improvements that are done to that building are property of the association. So that's the consideration given for the value of that money.
Great. Did that answer the questions regarding the payment terms and the loan history with ARC? I have a question. Go ahead, Mickey.
So one is, so they've made a recent payment, it looks like, of $104,000. Is that, because that's a little bit above what they've been paying. So they just wanted to get it down to the $220. What was the deal?
Yeah, it must have been. I mean, they made it an even payment to make it exactly $220. But yeah, I think they wanted to show a good faith in entering into another request, I'm sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have we gotten anything more from ARC with respect to a final cost of what they want to do on phase 3?
So they went to a vote with their constituents and approved approximately $39,000 to be spent on architect drawings to give us more solid numbers in terms of what they anticipate, what the estimate for the project is going to be. The first estimate was essentially 1.1 million, and that was also given by the architect who has just ballparked a ballpark number from the architect who did the first two phases based on what they were requesting. So we've asked in a planning meeting, we've asked them to spend the funds to get a more accurate picture of what that project will cost, as well as they have a donor for the steel. So we also wanted to see what the value of that would be, so that we know exactly what that donation will be in the project. And those are a couple months out. So yeah, it'll take a couple months to get all that information together and working with the architect.
Do you know whether or not the ARC is then going to, once they have that number, whether they're going to have a full membership vote as to whether or not they want to proceed?
Yeah, I don't know if they're here. Yes, they're shaking their heads. Yes.
So Cliff, can you clarify that the steel donation would reduce the 1.1 million? Is that the?
Yes, the steel donation would reduce that current ballpark number. So, and that's for not only the steel but the install. So we have to, obviously, they would have to negotiate that, or we would obviously do that too, negotiate that with the contractor, and they're still going to price in. They're the contractor, so they're still going to price in a piece for them to oversee that. But yes, it will reduce the current ballpark number of 1.1 million.
Cliff, could you talk about how the loan is funded? It doesn't come out of the reserve fund. You manage it out of the operating fund. Can you describe that?
Sure. Yeah. So this loan is funded with the operating fund. We have two funds. We've got our reserve fund and our operating fund. Operating funds operations. Our reserve fund funds capital improvement projects. This project, because it would be a note, repayable, would not be funded through the reserve fund. It would be funded through the operating account. Our operating account, depending on the time of year, could have anywhere from 6 to 11 million in it at any given point in time.
So you manage the loan through that balance in the operating fund, and I think the comment I heard you say in the meeting we went to was it's manageable.
It is, yes. So both of these were funded the same way. Right. So when we collect that $220,000, that money will not go into the reserve fund. That'll stay in the operating account because those funds originally came out of the operating account.
So the operating account would be larger if we didn't have this loan on the books.
Yes, currently at $220,000 larger.
And if another organization wanted to come forward with a similar arrangement, that would put more pressure on your operating fund.
Yes.
So that's kind of part of the decision process.
It is.
Yes. You're tying up your operating fund to some extent.
Yes, and we couldn't do too many of these projects. Right. Now, at the same time, there's only a select group of clubs that are 501c3s that even have the ability to generate this type of cash to repay a note. So there's not many clubs that would qualify.
Thank you. I had, I've had a couple of questions I'm sorry, does somebody else have a question?
I had a question, Ed. This kind of goes back a little bit to the audit report. In the audit report, in the line item, when they discussed it, they had ARC, they had Rotary Club Tennis, and then other.
Yes.
Are those other three items, are they under a loan type of agreement, or what are they actually? Because they come under the audit and then.
Yes, they are. Yep. Those are loans. The pickleball loan is, and the tennis loan are funded by naming rights agreements that go out till another 15 years that are going to get funded through that. So those loans are getting funded through those naming rights agreements. over time.
And they pretty much have the same terms as this loan did, or are they different?
No, their terms are longer because the naming rights terms are longer.
I did have a couple of questions that came in from members to me personally, and I said I would address them at the meeting today. I think you've addressed quite a few of them. One of them was they wanted to know, how does ARC plan to maintain the long-term membership that they've enjoyed over the past many years? And I went down and met with them, and they had, we had a very good discussion, and they said our membership varies from year to year, like every club. This year's membership is currently 630. Every year we top out at around 700. We see no decline in membership for the foreseeable future, as there seems to be an interest in restoring vehicles in every generation, including Gen Xers. And although the Gen Xers may be interested in refurbishing a slightly different type of car, it may not be the antique cars, they still see that generational thing continuing, which I thought was a great answer. There was also a question, there was some confusion about the amount of money that's being donated between $150,000 and $400,000. And in talking about that, the metal donation, somehow people got the idea that they were going to donate a set of steps, you know, and they kind of laughed me out of the building, but they said, no, it's not just for steps. It's for all the metal that's going to be used in the construction. And I think it's supposed to be the metal and the fees to do the implementation, the installation of the steel. So when people said, why is there a rush to get this done? Because we have a limited time to take advantage of that donation. That vendor can't leave that donation open-ended for 2 or 3 years, so they gave us a specific period of time, which I think was about 18 months, to come back and do that allocation. So that's where we're seeing that money come that's going to really help to fund that project, is the donation from that steel manufacturer. I know that they did an electronic vote of their membership, and over 71% of them approved the expenditure of just the architectural drawings. So I think that 71% really gave a clear indication that the organization itself approves of these enhancements and these changes, but I'm sure that they'll do another vote to validate that for us. And of course, the benefits are that Sun City West gets a really pretty building. They end up with a beautiful display case, you know, it's going to be walled in with the glass so that they can park cars out there and keep them protected. They're going to have new office space, which right now, what I saw them operating out of looked like a small utility closet, you know, that they're trying to run the whole operation out of. So they're going to get a storage or an office space, but in addition, there's also going to be a meeting room that's going to be in front of that building that will give us, I think the ability was for 15 to 20, depending on how we set it up. So anybody in the community, all the clubs will be able to allocate or reserve that space if it's available. So I think that's very good. So I think there's some multi-benefits to this. In addition, they're also getting a second story where they'll be able to store a lot of the supplies and things that they need and that they carry on. So I think those are the questions that were asked of me by many of the owner members. Does anybody else have any questions or comments about that?
I do have membership numbers for the last 3 years. So in 2022, because we collect this data as well. So in 2022, they had 707, 2023, 740, and 2024, 755
Okay,
of membership.
that's great.
And at the end of the year, in
Okay.
December.
So I think that we have addressed the questions that were asked of us by the owner members and by the committee members. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments to make about this? We're going to continue to move forward. We'll do the whole process. There'll be, you know, the RFPs and the entire approval process will carry forward. Do we have any questions online? No questions online. I see I have someone at the podium.
A stranger swoops in. I'm Christine Novello. I'm the governing board president, 127780. And just to also, there have been a few questions from other community members and some other committees to me, and I wanted to share with this committee as well. Remember where we are in the overall budgeting process. Budget and finance is very precise, and I certainly appreciate having been the treasurer at one point in my governing board career. I appreciate and really value the analysis that budget and finance goes through. Just remember that at this point, the decision or the recommendation that you are being asked to make is, do we even want to include this in the potential budget? Should our staff go forward and continue to analyze and spend their time? So really, remember, it's a tough, you guys are in an especially tough position, all the committees are, but you're being asked not to give a recommendation on the final outcome at this time. You don't have all the information. So just remember that. The recommendation you're being asked, that your chairperson's asking you to make or will be asking you, is based on what you know, and you'll come back and see more final numbers as they evolve, as Cliff mentioned, in the coming months. These numbers will continue to evolve as the design becomes clear. Just wanted to add that.
Okay, thank you. So the entire project will still be handled like a capital improvement project,
Exactly.
despite the fact that we're using the operating fund.
Exactly. It's still, and it's still part of your overall budget considerations, which will be for your final recommendations come spring, around March or so. Just know this will continue to evolve, assuming you recommend and everybody recommends we go forward.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Any other comments? All right. The next thing on my agenda was to propose a working group for the Audit Firm Selection Committee. And I have asked Mickey Jacobs and John Click to join myself along with Cliff and the finance team to go through the RFP process. And that is the tiniest eye chart I've ever seen in my life, okay? So we have a working group schedule, October, November, December, so we'll be, they're working on the RFP. Have you gotten the RFP completed yet, Cliff?
It's most of the way there. Just got to finalize it, and I'll send it out to the
Okay, so when the RFP is completed, then Mickey and John and I will have a chance to review that. And then in November, we'll attend presentations from the organizations who submitted proposals back and be able to question them. And then December, we should be able to make final recommendations with regards to the organization to perform the audit. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is for the financial audit that you saw today. We also engage with CLA on our tax reporting, and then we also engage with them on our 5500 audit for our employee investment 401k.
And this selection is going to be for the period of the next 5 years.
Yes. Yep. Policy allows us to do this for 5 years. We would like to engage in a 5-year
Okay.
cycle.
Any questions? Mickey, did you have a question?
So do we have an idea of how many respondents we might expect?
Well, we'll be very select on who we send it to because there's not a lot. I mean, you have the nonprofit world, and then you have the HOA world, and then you've got this, right?
Correct.
Sun City West we're the third largest in the country. So there's a very select group. Last year when we sent it out, we sent it to 4, got responses back from 3. The 3 we got were CLA, the firm that does Grand, and the firm that does Sun City. Those are the 3 we got back that presented. So we'll do the same. We'll send it out and see what we get back. But yeah, we won't have a mom and pop. Probably. Yeah, it'll be a big firm.
So we sent this out last year. Do we just engage for 1 year? Was that it?
No, we didn't send it out last year. We sent it out 3 years ago.
Oh,
This
so
last
3
RFP
years,
was a 3-year
3-year,
RFP.
and now 5.
Yeah, so
Okay.
policy allows us to engage in an RFP with our audit firm for up to 5 years. And we would like to do one for 5 years.
All right, are there any questions or comments about the working committee or the audit selection process? Thank you, Mickey, and thank you, John, for volunteering. Forgot to take one step back, there you go. The next thing on my checklist here is talking about the Properties Committee, and the Budget and Finance group, or quite a few of them, have been attending many of the property walkthroughs, and they're able to then see the kinds of changes and kinds of improvements that are being recommended by the facilities, by Carl, by Russ, by the various people that are walking them through the facilities. And I think we've only had, well, today was number 3. So this would have been the 3rd one today, and we'll end up having, I think, a total of 7, potentially before they're all over. Oh, there they are, right there in front of me. 3, 6, 7. Yep. So I think those are going quite well. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about that? And again, that'll just help us feed in and understand better about our budget policy, our budget concerns. The next item on the agenda is the policy review. So what we did with the policy review was we sent out, I asked everybody to read all the policies, obviously, from start to finish, and then we assigned specific policies to individuals and asked them to do a deeper dive on that. Not that everybody can't have any feedback on any of the policies, but we wanted to cover these. I personally have a 90-minute meeting rule limit, so we will cover for the next 30 minutes or 25 minutes these policies, and whatever we don't cover today, the next meeting will be November 4th, and we'll pick up November 4th with our policies and hopefully get those completed. Any policy change that we recommend as a group has to be taken up to the governing board for review. And if the governing board accepts that change, then those policies have to be sent off to legal to be reviewed and approved. And so we made a big point out of making sure that we wanted to have very content-specific types of changes, not just adding a comma or the of or the or something like that, but we wanted to make sure we had specific content changes that needed to be made. The governing board last week in our workshop had a discussion about doing an overall review of all of the bylaws and the policies to clarify and make sure that they all kind of use the same language and the same format and those kinds of things throughout. I believe it's going to be a significant expense. I know for us, I've been estimated that for every policy we turn into legal to change is anywhere from a $1,500 or $2,000 legal bill. So we just want to make sure that those things are kept in mind and we're following through with those changes. So with that in mind, the first one we had was Mickey. I'll let each person go through their own. So Mickey, you had FI01, which was the accounting for capital assets.
So here's what I would say with this one is, I wouldn't say this was wordsmith. What I really did was try to make this more clear and also more in keeping with capital asset policies. So for example, this started out with expenditures, should start out with capital assets. Then we have such as, I just cleaned this one up. This is one that if we were going to defer to a complete revision, I would leave this untouched until we went to the complete revision. However, if you come down a little bit, come down to, keep going. So here, for example, on July 1st, 1990, we do not have to say when we adopted this. It is, this just isn't in keeping with the way this would be stated. So I have made it the way you would normally state it and also put in this schedule shall, at the bottom, this schedule shall be, just of that 3. This schedule shall be submitted to the Budget and Finance Committee for review. I added as part of the annual budget process as opposed to whenever, okay, to make it. Then if we just go down this in the guidelines, there's not much there except, keep going. At the bottom, and then at the bottom, we say chartered clubs shall maintain detailed assets, and then we say that it applies to chartered club records only. It's redundant. And frankly, in all of our policies, there's a lot of this. They are unclear and redundant, and often cover not just policy, but also insert procedure, which is inappropriate for policy. Policy should be policy, and then procedure is delegated to management to to execute. So, but as I said, this one, if we're going to do a complete redo, I would defer this until we did that.
All right, could we scroll back down, Karen, just a little bit? Because there was that one, there, the whole paragraph or sentence, the beginning of the paragraph, right there. So that could go, but it's, that in itself, there are no changes that you've made on here that would prevent us from operating.
No, that's exactly. And that is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Is that is why I would, that's why I would defer this but I highly recommend that at some point we undertake a complete review.
Okay. Thank you for that. Don?
I'd like to point out 3.5. It talks about the chartered Cubs shall maintain detailed asset records for all assets over $300. Do we really keep detailed records of something that inexpensive? And is that really necessary? It seems to be cumbersome and.
We like to have that for a couple of reasons. One, just so that we know what assets are on the property, but we also provide it to our insurance carrier so that
But
we
what's
know
our
what
deductible
the
on it?
exposure is.
What's our deductible on it?
10,000.
Okay.
So is it your view then that some of the assets combined would equal 10,000, even though we don't hit the 300?
So there's, I think there's one of our theater clubs that have a bunch of playbills, that playwrights or whatever, that are $200, $300, $400 each, but there's a lot of them. So that would be an example of just knowing what we have on the property in terms of assets. And our insurance company wants to know that as well, our insurance carriers for our property insurance. So that's why that's in there.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
I know it seems tedious, but
That's
yeah.
my thought, yes.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so we'll move on to the next one. FiO2, the capital expenditure budget, that was going to be for you, Chris?
Right, and it's actually a pretty clean document, so I caught myself doing a little bit of wordsmithing and grammar correction, but not even necessary, like I was forcing it, so I suggest it remains unchanged.
It remains unchanged. Okay, that's great. FiO3 was given to Bill Weaver, the property owner changes and refunds of members' dues and fees.
Yes, what I found with this was it was very difficult to read, and it just had so many, it seemed like words missing or assumed references backwards, plus a lot of, I think they're referred to as passive versus active type sentences. And I don't believe I've changed any of the content, but I did a lot of clarity, I think, in particular, well, down in section 3, I mean, adding, it's like you have to assume that you're talking about refunds, even though that's what it's there. It just didn't read very well if you read the original, and then you get to 3.2, and it just had upon property sales, and then, so then if you're trying to just kind of read this for the first time, it just didn't make a lot of sense to me. You had to kind of reread it to kind of make it readable, I thought. So then I just kind of proceeded throughout the entire document and tried to make it more readable. Something that's changing, and I was trying to look this up too, because I have a tendency to use must instead of shall, but there seems to be something legally that legal people seem to like shall, but there is a trend toward must even in the legal side. But I tried to find a difference between the two, and it's very, very small difference between the two words, but there is a preference there. The only other thing is that didn't make sense to me, like at 3.323 at the end, and I didn't change it on this, but when I got to the end, I started thinking about this. Refunds will not be processed after this period. I think it's refund requests will not be accepted because we could still be processing a refund after that was received. And so it's, again, it was just an unclear statement. It says refunds will not be processed or will not be made after the 1 year. But really what you want to say is that refund requests will not be processed after that point. I don't know that we're making the refund right away, so this was another one of those things that I just found unclear as I went along through the document. But pretty much all of it is just, it's probably, I guess you could call it wordsmithing, but I found it very difficult to read, just the entire document.
So is this an item then that you would propose that we put forward to the governing board to review and ask to have it, to not call it wordsmith, but that there's enough content changes in here that you think make it specific to be better understood and more readable?
I would say if they're not going to go through the overall review that they've talked about, that this definitely should be changed.
Okay, and if they decide to go through the review, then,
I think it would probably stand as it is until you did that, but I think it really would make it something that the average person could go through and read.
So, Anne, so
Yes.
I have a comment. I was responsible for the review of this document last year. I had exactly the same response and the same comments. I found it completely unreadable. But we decided to kick it down the road for another year.
Okay.
So I would agree on this particular one, particularly since it is refunds. It is something that we need to do. It needs to be more clear.
all right. So this is an item that if the governing board decides not to move forward with the overall review, this one should go on the top of the pile versus the others we say can hold out. All right. FI04 was John Click.
Yeah, I thought the content of this policy was good and would recommend we move it forward.
Okay, thank you very much. The insurance policy, FI05, was Don Taylor.
Right. I read this and it looked fine, except for one thing. There's no talk about having a deductible on the insurance policy, and all insurance policies have deductibles. And so I thought we should just add something to that effect, that the board has the authority to set that limit as they see fit.
Is there someplace here in the document where you identified that? Oh, just that the governing board shall have the right to determine the adequate deductible for all insurance policies. Cliff, how do you respond to that?
Well, the deductible's negotiated when we're doing the renewals. So sometimes, especially recently, the deductible has weighed into whether we would, the deductible amount has weighed in to the overall premium. And the flexibility to be able to do that while we're negotiating operations, I think is an operations thing. I don't think it's a governing board thing,
Okay,
personally. So the deductible is set in the insurance premium in the insurance policy. And again, that is negotiated when we're going through the renewals. And it could be negotiated with, if we're going out to bid, it could be negotiated with 3 or 4 different insurance carriers. So to me, that's part of the operations process of renewing our insurance.
okay. Anybody else have any comments regarding that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of full circle. The governing board approves, don't they? The governor board approves the insurance proposal, or does the governing board see it afterwards? I'm trying to see if even though it's not written,
Right.
does the governing board say, hey, that sounds like a good deal, but that deductible is terrible?
No. The governing board does not. We present the renewal after we've negotiated the renewal to budget and finance, and it's moved forward, kind of like the audit. Same process. So no, it's not. Our insurance renewals, our health insurance renewals, all those are done operationally and presented to the board and budgeted for in our budget process.
Okay.
As far as the expenditures for those things. Again, this process is an operations process. When we go through these renewals, there's a lot of real game time decisions that need to be made when we're going through that process. And if we had to go through an approval process to do that, that wouldn't put us in a great position to be able to take advantage of bids and things like that. It would extend the process for going through bidding and all that. We had a window of time we have to do that in as well. So there's, I mean, to me, there's no benefit that the board would approve that, but again, it's up to this committee if they want to make that recommendation to the board.
All right, so there we go. Dave?
So just one question. Wouldn't you use the deductible as part of the negotiating process?
Yes.
Right, so
Yeah.
we wouldn't want to interfere with that, I don't think.
No, that's, yeah. Yep. Operationally, it would make it very tough to, in the negotiation process. We do work through a broker, but that then, again, adds another layer of, in the process.
Okay. One more, go ahead.
The reason that I wrote it this way is to give that flexibility in the negotiation process. It wasn't like I'm trying to say, this is what the deductible should be. You should have the ability to, I mean, we need a deductible in there.
Okay, that's an interesting statement. I appreciate that very much. How many people agree that we should ask the governing board to incorporate that language into our policy? I'm not seeing any big yays on that one. Okay, so I think you got a big nay on that. Were there any other changes to that policy that you saw? Okay, so then that policy, FI05, will stay as drafted currently. And then there was also FI09, which was the owner-developer facility investment that you had, Don.
No changes on that.
No changes on that one. Okay, that's fairly good. Okay, the next one we have is FI10, which is the procurement policy. Nikki, you had that?
I did. So the changes that I made, again, were to make this flow be more clear and in kind of in alignment with a procurement policy. So for example, we put I changed the order in the bidding and disbursement process that the requirement of what needs to be approved is up front and then qualifying language comes next, as opposed to the other way. The really important part of this, though, is down in vendor relationships. If you go down to vendor relationships, so this is very unclear in these two, 6.1 and 6.2, where there's a strict prohibition for any employee, blah, 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 and then that the general manager is required to create and communicate a gift from vendors policy. Well, that's not a policy. That is a procedure delegated to the general manager. So instead, I did some research. On more standard clauses. And the more standard clauses is that we lay out, and if you'd come back to 6.1, is that we say that no employee, committee member, or governing board director will participate in the process if they have a conflict of interest, either real or apparent, that any reasonable person would consider. And then we go on to say, that could be because they have a financial interest, blah, blah, blah. So this is 6.1 is much more clear than what we had in there. 6.2 then goes into, as opposed to a gift policy, blah, 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 is that we say they're not allowed to accept gratuities, consulting fees, or anything having a monetary value in excess of blah. We already have that in a handbook, right, our employee handbook. So this could just say, here's the amount, or it could say having a monetary value as described in the handbook, for example. So I think that these two, again, I think these changes are ones that I think that we should stop kicking these down the road, is what I think. And I think that these two on what is a conflict of interest and that you cannot accept gifts those two are important and would be included in most.
Okay. And you feel strongly that these should be incorporated into our document policy changes, whether or not the governing board decides to do a wholesale overview?
I could be, here's what I'm saying. What I'm really saying is if the board does not undertake a complete review, I think that we as the finance.
This rises up.
I think this rises up to, and not just these two that I did, but others. I think that our own policies should be made more streamlined, more coherent, policy-oriented, take out as I said, take out the things that are procedural and take out the numerous instances of redundancies.
Okay.
I think that's what we should do.
So we would put a dot next to that one like the others.
Yes.
Yeah, as we did with,
And if I could just comment on this, I had this policy last year, I remember the discussion of this concept.
did you hit your,
Oh, I thought it was on.
oh, the mic's not close enough.
Okay. I remember last year either having this policy to review or we had a discussion on this. And I'm concurrent with you. I think that the conflict of interest policy is one that needs some further review. I know there's a board conflict of policy, and that was where we had the discussion upon, did we want to start changing this without addressing the other? So I think your ... is really important. But I do believe that it came up last year, and I think it's come up this year. And I think it's an important point that we need to have clarified.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments? Yes.
I don't disagree with what she said and what you did here, Vicki, but I cannot, for the life of me, have something open without dollars or something in it.
That's not going to be open. That is, I just didn't know what the number, I didn't know what it was going to be.
There'll be a real number put in there.
Yes, that will be a real number. Yeah, sorry.
$1 million. That's right. That's right.
And the other thing I should say, I also, per the association bylaws, the general manager is authorized to make certain non-budgeted emergency repairs. I had changed that. I calculated it, came up with 75 grand, but I think it's actually in the bylaws. I think that 1/4 of 1%, blah, 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 so we probably should leave that alone.
Okay. All right.
That's correct. It is in the bylaws.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, so I did have this policy to review last year, and what started off, I thought, is the smallest little suggestion, because I saw $25 and I said, boy, they couldn't buy you a pizza for $25. Maybe we should raise it to $35. And then it added a lot of conflict. There was conflict because there was other situations. And my takeaway at the end of what turned out to be a very, very, very long multi-meeting discussion is that we kind of do the what, hey, have a policy, keep this in line, and that operations does the, how or the detail. In other words, we want to stop it at $30 or $50 or twice a year or whatever they want to do. And that was my takeaway from last year. So I just feel like this goes back to putting it where it was the year before, which means every single year we have to try to determine if a pizza is $25 or $30 or $32 or if the box of candy, I think that's one of the examples I used was, a box of C's candy, right, is not $25 anymore. Somebody has to figure out what that dollar amount is. And I didn't want confliction. I didn't want it, because what happened is it ended up in 3 different locations.
Yes.
where does it belong?
So
That's the question.
I agree with that, which is why I just said, I think that maybe what we should say is having a value as determined in the handbook or wherever, right? Is that just to say, you're not allowed to accept anything, but the amount will be determined operationally, is what I would suggest at this point.
So do you want to take a chance, you want to take an opportunity to rewrite 6.2? Okay, so let's do that. So we'll move on to FI 11. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Another comment. Point 1.2, I didn't understand the purpose of that statement whatsoever. It says that the general manager is authorized. Why isn't it the general manager is responsible to ensure that procedures exist? It didn't make sense that the general manager was authorized to write procedures, but then below there it talks about departmental procedures. And so it just seemed like it was
So
either misplaced or,
Well, it's the language is in there 3 times, right? Departmental, so we made them all the
Yeah.
same.
yes.
I have a similar concern in that we're not really sure what departmental procedures are. Is there a handbook? Is there what? I think that what we really need to put some language in here that actually says the general because operationally they do have the ability to put together procedures to ensure compliance with this policy, but I'd like to rename to whatever it is, here it said, first it said administrative procedures and rules, all capitalized, which means that should be an actual document. And if there is that actual document, then we should refer to that once and probably press on.
Then also I had noticed that down at the end of vendor relationships, 6.1 and 6.2, 6.1 has employees, committee members, and governing board, but below it just has employees. So employees cannot, so she has made it different. The revisions includes board members, committee members also cannot receive gifts, but the original does not have that. It just has employees.
Correct, but there is, because it is actually, it's all 3. It is all 3, so I did change it to that.
Yes, but I mean, the original didn't have that.
Correct.
That's
Yes,
right.
okay.
That's right. So
Sorry, I
Go
just
ahead.
want to interject here. Last year, they were in there and they took them out because they were referring to the employee handbook, and then they had other policies in the RRPs, in the other policies that addressed conflicts of interest with committee and boards and directors. So I think that's why they took that back out last year when they did revise this one and just left the employee section in there, and then they said refer to the handbook. So that's why they took that out. And I know they're addressing it up throughout the document, but when it came to the dollar amount, they did not put the dollar amount, said refer to the handbook, and they took out the committee members and board members because they already have policies in other areas that dictate. So it's and I think this is what we got into last year, because once it went through all the committees, somebody said, well, yeah, this is redundant and all that. So I do like the changes in 6.1, and
Yes.
I personally, and then operationally, if we refer to the handbook for employees, I think that's a great.
In 6.2.
Those would hem it up in 6.2,
Right.
and then just let the other policies dictate
Well,
the conflicts in those other areas.
So here's I'm going to push back on that. So this is procurement. This might be where it belongs, as opposed to, because this is where you deal with conflicts of interest in procurement, right? This is where, and the reason that you cannot accept gifts and gratuities is because of vendor relationships and relationships with others. So I would push back on that and say that perhaps this is where it belongs.
All right, any other comments about that? Do we feel it belongs in our policy, Or do we feel that we should modify this language to say, as per the employee handbook, which is what I'm kind of hearing Cliff?
That, to me, though, so what that says, if you leave out of this language, committee member or governing board, you are, and you
We're
have
not-
singled them out above. They are included above, and you leave them out of the second half.
I see.
That leaves you open for discussion of, okay, you did not indicate that they were not to, that, so I think that it leaves you open for misinterpretation of your intent.
All right, that's great.
So
Okay.
I think what we can do maybe is set the dollar value for committees and governing board and all that in its own bullet point, and then employee refer to the handbook.
Okay.
I think I think that would work. Then if we
Would you
did
say that one more time, please?
So instead of in 6.2 referencing all stakeholders, then you just break out 6.2 to say it. The association's committee members and governing board, and 6.3, the association's employees, when it comes to gratuities.
Okay.
If that's accepted, I mean, that'll have to go up to the board and all that, but I think that's a way of keeping them both in there. I don't disagree with Mickey on the fact that this is the appropriate place for it in procurement.
Yeah.
Okay, Mickey, can you rewrite that paragraph for us?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so in keeping with my word, it's been 90 minutes, and so we're going to stop here at F10, and Mickey's going to do some editing on that paragraph, and we'll come back. Our next meeting is scheduled for November the 4th. And I can find my pages here. And so what I'm going to do now is just go through the various committee comments. Are there any comments from the committee that they'd like to bring up right now? I'll start on this end down here.
No, I'm
No.
fine.
Thank you.
I just think we need to wait for the governing board to make their decision on what they want to do before we try and go through all this work and all this process and all of this rewording and all that kind of, especially if it's going to go through legal and all of that, because that's an expenditure that we don't want to happen once, twice, 3 times. So I was willing to just hold off until governing board makes their decision.
My hope is that if we take these red line documents to the governing board meeting in November, where they'll be able to see what we think are really valid changes, then that will sway them one way or the other. So we'll finish this up the November 4th meeting, and then the November, I believe it's 7th, is the governing board workshop that these would be brought up to them. Okay? David?
No, nothing else.
Nothing else? Dave?
Nothing else.
Thank you. Cliff? Chris?
I think Bill made 2 really good points that made me realize that we really have to approach this 2 ways. Number one, content.
Right.
And I think when I was mentioning Bill, when he mentioned the fact that we shouldn't process a refund, right? The timing of the process of a refund, that's a content change that made a lot of sense. And then when he mentioned that the word shall and the word must is not consistent, that's a formatting process. And I think the formatting process has gotten in the way of our review right now. And I wish we'd lay off on that and just focus on our process, any process or policy change that we think is important. And then agree or disagree on those. And then we can move forward ourselves or the board or somebody else later with the formatting.
Very good. John?
No comment.
Don?
No comment.
Mickey?
I just, off the policy, but back to the audit, is, our audit results are really, really good. I mean, they're really good. And what I want, early in my career, I was unfortunately an auditor. but not for very long. And to have, and I think that it is well said to just indicate what a great result we have every single year, which is they come in, review all of our policies, procedures, our internal controls, and come up with no adjustments.
That's
right?
right.
And no adjustments. So I think that that is just an indication of another indication of how well run the financial department is.
Cliff's head's getting bigger
Yeah,
and
poor
bigger
little- poor
and bigger.
Cliff. And it's not just the financial, it is, to put those together, it takes everyone. It takes everyone, properties, everyone to
That's-
put that together. And so to have such a great result, and I've only done this 2 years, but for the last 2 years, is just really a very good indication of how well-run this is.
Great, thank you. Don?
My only comment is that I was on the other side of the auditors. I was the one who was having everything reviewed. And I think they have done a good job. The only other thing I'm interested in knowing when we're going to do it, once we go through all of these property reviews for the budget, capital budget for next year, are we going to have a committee or anybody sitting down and going through all this stuff for us to decide what we like or what we don't like?
Yeah, we can bring that up in the November 4th meeting, and I can show you the timeline.
Okay.
We have a timeline that was actually presented, I think, in our first committee meeting, that showed sort of the months of when we do the various types of activities. And so that'll be coming up, I think in December is when we start seeing the capital improvements, and then in January, we have to have our budgets together to take to the board round about those dates.
That's correct. Yes, we'll give a list, an initial list in December, and then in January we'll start presenting with dollar figures and budget and finance sees everything. So
Yeah.
you'll see the full capital improvement budget,
Right.
and then give feedback on that. Then the different committees will give their feedback on committee specific items. That feedback will be taken in by the governing board and then general manager, and any updates will be continued to be pushed out in the process. If there's an update in the price or an add or a removal for one reason or another, we'll review those at various meetings throughout the budgeting process, and then April, the final recommendation will be required by the April B&F meeting to go to the governing board. It can be done in April or before, but given that information to the governing board so that they have that in their decision-making process. But the governing board decides on the capital budget. They're just taking information and feedback from the committees.
Thank you. Do we have any comments or questions online?
No, we don't.
Thank you.
I could ask for a clarification, please, at 406 policy reviews per today's discussion.
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Per policy reviews today at agenda item 406, we only have one policy that's being re-revised, that's FI10.
That's right.
The rest are as is.
They are as is today, based on the decisions of what the governing board does in the coming weeks with the overall evaluation of our bylaws and our policies. So I've highlighted the individual items that if the board decides not to do the wholesale review, that we have right now 3 items identified that they need to be modified and reviewed and sent to legal at this point. Otherwise, the other, out of 14, we've made it through 7. Nikki's going to do some recrafting on the last one on FI10 for us, but we'll pick up the other 7 on the November 4th meeting, and we'll see what we get to with that. Is that clear? Very good. Everybody happy? Yes, sir.
On number 3, there are 2 other places where it's 323 and 432 that should, or 423 that should say request won't be accepted. I didn't change that in that, I only changed it in one, so the two of the, so it's just a minor change to make it consistent.
So FI03
Yeah, let me,
is one of the items that I have tagged that despite what the governing board decides, that we think that needs to be reviewed, written, and sent to legal.
okay,
Is that okay?
right, but there are a couple other modifications that I don't have in there.
Do you
That I
want to make
should-
those changes
I
so we
should-
can see those?
Yes, I'd like to make
All
those
right.
changes. and then
So
give
we
those-
will relook at FI03 as well as FI10 on the November 4th meeting. And then we'll carry on with FI11 and hopefully make it through all 14. I thank you all very much. It is 10:40 and I adjourn this meeting for today. Thank you very much.